Welcome to part 2 of my series about the modular soft synth SoloRack. In this second tutorial, I talk about the menus and the functions they contain, as well as about some hidden functions which you perhaps won't discover at once. I'd like to repeat my promise from tutorial 1. Those of you who are new to the matter of modular synthesis, and maybe not only the absolute beginners, will get all explanations they need to understand what's going on in this video and in all of the following ones, so that everybody can follow and enjoy this series. So, if you watch all parts of this series, you will build up a comprehensive knowledge base, especially about modular synthesis, but also about synthesis in general. I'll share a remarkable part of my over 40 years of working with synthesizers with you in this series. Be patient and stay curious. When we click in the preset window, right-click or left-click, both work, we get access to about 300 presets shipped with the VST. They are divided into 13 groups to make it easier to find a certain preset or a certain kind of preset. Basic examples: bass, chord, drones, FX, lead, machines, pads and scapes, percussion, plugs, poly, sequences and templates. The names of the groups are self-explanatory, and this is not a let's demo all presets video, but it's a tutorial. But one group needs a closer look: the group sequences. There are sequences which start at once after loading the preset, and there are other sequences which start and run only when I hit a key on my keyboard or any other MIDI controller. And there are sequences which work only when they get a clock signal from my DAW, for example when I start my DAW's sequencer. You will understand the differences in the behavior of these sequences when you follow this series of tutorials, but for now it's only important to know there are differences so that you won't get puzzled when surfing through the presets. The last item in the menu is not a folder, a group of presets, but a single preset itself. It's called blank, and that is exactly what it is. You don't have to delete a dozen of modules when you want to start from scratch again. Just go and load blank. You can use your Windows browser to manage your presets. The shown folder and the shown folders, there are more, and structures are residing in the My Documents SoloRack folder. From here you can make changes, add or reorganize the presets, included those you have made yourself. But, surprise, surprise, after returning to SoloRack, I can't discover the changes in the preset menu. Well, I have to refresh the preset library first. I find this function in the main menu next to the preset window. I click on Refresh and voila! The changes I made using my Windows browser, I changed only the name of a preset so far, occur even in the SoloRack. I can reorganize the library according to my needs and preferences. I can add folders and subfolders and sub-subfolders. I can rename everything. In short, I can handle the presets and their folders as any other Windows file or Windows folder. But I recommend saving the default structure somewhere on your hard disk or flash disk or anywhere else, before you go and mess things up in a way you might regret later. This advice is also valid for any structure of your preset library you have found useful while working with SoloRack. Well, let me return to the default structure and delete all the remaining mess. Well, we have reached the main menu by now. Let's see what functions, besides refresh, it offers. I will return to the file structure later, but still in this video, when I talk about the init file of SoloRack and some hidden gems. But now for the main menu. The functions open, save and save as allow us to store and use presets even outside of the shown preset library. We already met them in tutorial number 1. I use these functions, here with SoloRack as well as with AlbiSTs, to store presets which are related to a certain project in a multi-VST preset library, which is structured according to the structure of the project I'm working on. This library contains all presets of the project, no matter what VSTs they are from. Sometimes it happens to me that I have designed a sound, made a preset, and I tweak it just a little bit more the next time I use it. The differences between these two presets are small, really small sometimes, but I want to save them both. Instead of typing the whole preset name and adding something like version 2 or just v2 at the end of the name, I can use the function save as new version. The function preset description seems self-explanatory. Let's try it. I changed the preset and returned to the described one later and hey, where is my new description? Well, I have to save the preset after describing it or after changing the description. And there is another thing you should know. When you tweak a preset and save it, even when giving it a complete new name, the description stays unchanged as long as you don't change it as well. the default author. Well, by default, SoloRack takes you, the license owner, of as the author of every preset you save. You can overwrite this default author, of course you can, and in the preset description, but you have to do it every time you save a new preset when you don't want the name your license is running under be the name of the author of the preset. Well, with default author, you can set another name as default to make life easier. Oversampling, oh yeah. SoloRack offers up to 256 times oversampling. The default setting is no oversampling. Alright, some basic explanations first. Let me approach the matter step by step. Explanation 1, simple, easy and mostly wrong. The more often we oversample, the better is the quality of the sound. Let's try another one. Explanation 2. Oversampling means taking samples more often than necessary. Sounds like nonsense. Is nonsense, but with a grain of truth. Alright, so what about that? Explanation 3. Oversampling reduces aliasing. Okay, true at last, but what is aliasing? Well, I'd like to explain the phenomenon of aliasing, at least a bit more in depth. Ladies and gentlemen, attention please. Attention, if there is anybody who is allergic to real knowledge and deeper understanding, please leave the building. Our premises are polluted by the deadly virus of science. Okay, let's imagine I had a wave, kind of sine wave for example, and I took samples at a certain rate, meaning at certain regular times. In other words, I measure the amplitude of the wave at a certain frequency, let's say every millisecond. That is approximately what you see in the graph, by the way. The computer gets these sampled values and only these values. In other words, the computer doesn't get any drafted wave, but only some amplitudes at certain moments. But as our computers are very good at mathematics, they don't have any problems to calculate how the wave described by the measured amplitudes has to look like, better said, has to sound like. Okay, I know, this is kind of simplification, but this video isn't meant to be a tutorial in information technology or recording sound. There is going to be another series of mine next year, 2018, where I explain things like that more detailed. But hey, there's a problem. And it's a big problem. There is another wave, one that is not my original audio wave, one that's not really there, one that I didn't sample, one which is completely unreal, but unfortunately one which would perfectly fit with the sampled amplitudes. Okay, I know my draft is not absolutely accurate, but you'll have got the point, right? And your computer, not knowing what to do, reproduces both waves, and the played-back result of my sampling activities sound unclean, not at all what the sampled sonic event sounded like. In short, the computer messed it up. That's the principle. A lower sample rate, less red points in the graph, leads to frequency ambiguity. I just want to add that there is a whole bunch of aliasing effects, but the aforesaid shall be sufficient for today. Ladies and gentlemen, come in again. The short viral attack of science has been successfully defeated. The building is clean again. Well, explanation 4 then. Oversampling means having a sample rate of more than double the frequency of the sampled signal or wave. Quite useful an explanation. Quite useful, but for the fact that it doesn't take our DAW into account. Last and final step and explanation 5. SoloRack's oversampling means that the VST samples internally at a higher rate than our DAWs do. In general, or basic settings of our DAW, of your DAW, you can determine your DAW's sample rate. You will have adjusted it to 44,100 Hz most of the time. Making SoloRack sample at an even higher rate guarantees that there is no or only very less sonic dirt being delivered to your DAW. But higher sample rates need a lot of CPU power. Please take care of that. I would not recommend using oversampling higher than 8 times, and even 8 times oversampling is so much that I can't imagine that it may be necessary to improve the quality of the sound which SoloRack creates most of the times. There is an exception. We will look at that later. Hey, it's time for something audible, isn't it? Let's listen to all of these oversampling and aliasing things at last. I take a sine generator for the oscillators group, from the oscillators group, and look at its spectrum. It contains only a single frequency, as every well-behaved sine wave should do. I modulate this super clean sine wave with a not so clean sine wave from the S310 VCO and get a very interesting sound. By the way, we are doing frequency modulation right now, a matter which I'm going to talk about in detail in later videos in this series, so stay tuned. I must admit, I'm a fan of these FM sounds, but they are terribly complex. Look at the spectrum. Not at all a simple one. I ask myself, what of the spectrum is real and what are added effects because of aliasing? Well, let me increase the sample rate to 2 times oversampling to find out. Wow, that's a difference, isn't it? A lot of those wrong aliasing girlfriends, do you remember the picture? They have gone. And look at the spectrum, how much different it is from the first one without oversampling. But, well, I like this first one, this dirty first sound also. So, clean is not always better. It depends on what you want to do with the sound. But let's proceed. Let's proceed and increase the sample rates to 4 times oversampling, and again a different sound. Some more aliasing effects, some more wrong frequencies have vanished. The difference is not as big anymore, but there still is a noticeable change in the sound and the spectrum. Alright, and what about 8 times oversampling? Well, the sound gets even cleaner, but I have to say, perhaps a bit too clean for me, but you are the boss. I promised some minutes ago to show you an exception of my 8 times oversampling kind of rule. And now, ladies and gentlemen, take your safety goggles on. I go to 16 times oversampling. The sound gets more and more sterile, and Just to anticipate the mentioned later tutorial, I can get exactly the same sound even with a lower sample rate, so why torturing my computer? But there is another important application for oversampling: filter sweeps. Let me demonstrate the differences without commands. Did you hear and see the difference? No? Well, neither did I. So, unless we are dealing with really complex sounds, like FM sounds for example, we will be happy even without any oversampling, at least no need to go above 4 or 8 times oversampling. And the few situations where higher sampling rates do make a difference need a knowledge which we still have to acquire. What? Oh yes, of course, I forgot. I forgot you sitting here in front of the first row of the classroom. You know already everything. Okay, please accept my excuse. Okay. Let's go for the rest of the functions in the menu. Cable transparency. There are 5 grades of transparency from none to 4, but you can't set a grade of transparency as long as CPU light cables is activated. So I switch the CPU light off and try again different transparencies. The name of the function LEDs the name of the function LEDs always on is kind of misleading because its real meaning is LEDs always active. Look at the voltage controlled LFO module. The LED in the lower left corner, the output or clock indicator, is on but not active, it's not blinking. Sometimes the LED is on, sometimes it's not, but it's only blinking when you hover over the module with your mouse pointer. But with LEDs always on, meaning always activated, the LED is active and blinks even without hovering my mouse pointer over the module. That can be helpful with, for example, lower LFO frequencies of different LFOs operating at different frequencies and modulating different units. The LEDs help then keeping an overview about what and when something is going on in the patch. Well, so far the menus. With the plus and minus buttons in the upper right corner of the GUI, we can add rows to the case or remove rows from the case. But be careful. If the case you are removing contains modules, they will get lost in the patch. With minus, you always remove the lowest row. You can't remove the last remaining row. Alright, some hidden functions. Fine-tune. When you hold Shift on your computer keyboard and move the mouse, the movements get a higher resolution and you can fine-tune the parameter. We can choose the color of the next cable we are going to attach by right-clicking on an empty space in the case, but we cannot change the color of an existing cable unless we remove it, determine the next color and draw it again. If you want to tweak a knob to exact the same value of another knob, which you have already tweaked, we can copy and paste the value. Right-clicking on the knobs opens the menu we need to do so. And for those of you who like strange, no, interesting experiments, you are not limited to the same kind of parameter. You can copy the value of any knob to any other knob. Well, some conventions concerning the front panels of the modules now. We can see that some of the signal inputs, the input jacks, are linked to a knob by a simple line. Let's look at the amplifier, for example. The CV input jack is linked to a knob named CV as well. In all situations like this one, the knob regulates how much influence the incoming signal has on the goings-on in the module. If the knob's position is 0, the incoming signal is completely blocked from the module. I use an LFO to modulate the amplitude, here also the volume, which the VCA produces. The influence of the LFO's signal is attenuated by the knob. We find a different kind of arrangement sometimes. Let's look at the front panel of the oscillator. There is a knob which regulates the pulse width of the signal, and there is an input jack seemingly doing the same, but they are linked by a line again, but it's a crossed line this time. This means that the knob changes its functionality, a bit at least, when we feed a signal into the input jack. Without any cable being connected to the jack, the knob determines the pulse width, the duty cycle, to use the precise term. More about duty cycles, by the way, in the next video. So the knob determines the pulse width. But when I feed a modulating signal in the input jack, not the knob determines the duty cycle, the pulse width, but the changing modulating signal does. The knob determines to which amount the modulating signal influences the changes. The function of the knob has changed from a knob determining the value of a parameter to a knob determining the range of changes of this parameter. And sometimes the knob and the correspondent input jack are not linked by a line at all. This means that the value of the knob and the mostly changing values of the incoming signal are added. Let me demonstrate it with the VCO's half-wave rectifier. Let me say it again, don't worry if you don't understand these functions of the VCO yet. You will understand after watching the next tutorial, number 3 in the series. Alright, there are some more hidden functions, just to return to the matter of hidden functions, but we won't find them in the GUI, we find them in the file called config. This file is in the same folder as the preset folder. We visited this folder earlier in this video. We can add functions there and we can change basic settings. We can, and we will, but not today. We should rather get more familiar with SoloRack before touching the config file, so I'll leave it to the next tutorial. And with that said, I've reached the fun part. Patching again. The patch I'm going to build up with you today is, like the patch in the first tutorial, a quite basic one, but you may well get the impression, hey, I've already heard this thing somewhere on some old records. And you're probably right. So let's start then. But I'm not going to just add one module after the other, draw some cables and let the patch play this time. I want to introduce the structure of the patch first. You will get a lot of wonderful sounds and great patches just by experimenting and trying, but it's always a good idea to plan at least the basic structure, the spline of the patch. And here it is. The DAW sequencer plays a melody, or you play it live. The MIDI note and gate signals are fed into SoloRack, the MIDI notes data in the oscillator, the VCO, and the gate signals go parallel into 2 envelope generators, 2 ADSRs. The oscillator generates audio, which is fed into a filter and from there to an amplifier. The cut-off frequency of the filter is modulated by one of the ADSR envelope generators. The amplifier, let me say the amplifier's output volume level, is modulated by the other ADSR. From the amplifier, the audio goes into a chain of effects and from there back to the DAW. That's the general structure. Let's look at the real patch. I've already installed all modules, but there are no patch cables so far. The effect chain contains a chorus, a delay, and a reverb unit. I start my DAW's sequencer so that we can gradually, consecutively hear how the sound is built up. The oscillator, the filter, the amplifier, and the amplifier's ADSR are in the upper row. The lower row contains the filter's ADSR and the effect chain. In the upper left corner and the lower right corner, there are the units which ensure the communication between the DAW and SoloRack. I connect my DAW with the VCO and patch the VCO's output to the main audio out. I'll substitute this connection while gradually setting up the patch. I insert the filter in the patch. We don't hear anything because the filter is completely closed. Its cutoff frequency is set to 0. I apply the filter's ADSR envelope generator to the filter. In other words, I insert the ADSR signal in the input jack of the filter, which modulates the cutoff frequency, but still nothing, no sound. Well, the ADSR needs a gate signal at every start of a note. Otherwise, it doesn't generate any envelope. I connect the gate input jack of the ADSR and the gate out jack of the MIDI CV signal unit, and I do this also with the second ADSR, the ADSR which shall modulate the amplifier. From the filter I send the audio into the amplifier, and again I don't hear anything because the amplifier's gain is closed. Well, I apply the second ADSR, therefore I must not forget to turn up the CV attenuator, the knob. I insert the effect chain, chorus, delay, reverb at last. Well, the patch is complete now. Let's tweak the knobs a bit, mainly the ADSRs. 2 times attack and 2 times decay. I try the amplifier's envelope at first. And now the same with the envelope of the filter. Okay, it's your turn now. Link the knobs of the two envelopes to your MIDI controller, let your DAW play a melody and start turning the knobs. A last tip. Don't forget that if you close the VCA, you won't hear a lot, and it doesn't matter what you are doing with the filter, and also the other way. If you close the filter's cut off, you won't hear much, whatever you may try tweaking the amplifier's envelope. And with that said, I say goodbye for today. Let it be enough for today. In my next tutorial about SoloRack, I'm going to talk about the oscillator units in detail, and of course we will, like always, construct a new patch. Thank you for watching. There is a website of mine at www.rofil-media.net where you will find more information about this series of tutorials and about a lot of other activities of mine. You will also find an overview about the things I'm currently working on, including all 4 of my YouTube channels, by the way. There is also a forum there, the Deep Sound Divers Coffee House, where you can discuss my videos. I work only part-time to be able to produce videos like this one, and I depend on donations to do so. If also you want to support my work, please click on the link in the comments to this video down and donate a bit. Thank you. And now have a great day and a good time. Rolf.